Hey YouTube, me Will from the Vanguard Critic, coming at you with my Megacolony deck profile. Now I know what you're saying, Megacolony, what's wrong with you? However, I had that same exact impression. Everyone has this kind of downward look upon Megacolony. However, the one local event that I participated in with this deck as a joke at first, I won, surprisingly. I beat out, I believe it was in 4 rounds, I beat 1 Kagero player, 2 Gold Paladin players, and 1 Shadow Paladin player. And then finals, I beat a Shadow Paladin player, I believe, for first place. And I was not going undefeated at that time, so I had to beat him twice. That our locals works in a way where the undefeated players have to be defeated until they have a worse ranking than you. So yeah, kind of pulled that one out of my hat, you could say. But yeah, the deck is interesting. It's a very weird weird play style per se. Let's get right into the profile. I'm gonna start with grade 3s. Just because I need to explain the grade 0s for a little bit. Yeah, our starting Vanguard, or starting grade 0 is Lava Mutant Giraffa. We are running the Giraffa Ride Chain that came out in the Shadow Paladin set. Just for consistency's sake, the grade 3 Giraffa is not as great as you would think. It has a kind of Kagero ability, which is kind of disappointing, especially since Megacolony is their own clan. They should have their own kind of strategy. So, we are running the ride chain, once again, just for consistency. For grade 3s, we are running 4 copies of the Master Beetle. He is our main Vanguard. He is our ace of the deck. So, if you see him in your opening hand, you're very happy. Now, for some reason, this guy really likes me. He is always in my opening hand, and I usually have, by the end of the game, 3, if not all 4 of them on the field, or like in my drop zone, or in my hand somewhere, or in my damage. They like me a lot. In that same tournament that I won, I actually came back from having all 4 in my hand first game and a grade 1. The grade 1 was the starting of the ride chain, which means I have all my numbers, but at the same time, it's not pretty at all. His effect is okay. It can definitely slow down the opponent late game and mid game. It's very high costly. However, his 11k stat really makes up for any minusing you could do. Now we have 2 copies of Bewitching Officer Lady Butterfly. She rather is the get the +2 when she attacks the Vanguard. We are running the 8k vanilla grade 1, so that makes a very nice column behind her against most of the metagame we have today. Now this is obviously pre-cross-ride format, so that probably will change later. I'll have to see how she does. Now, Lady Butterfly is not as good as a Vanguard as most others. You want the pressure of stunning, per se, a unit by not making it able to stand. So we are actually running 1 copy of the Evil Armor General Giraffa. His effect is not great. However, people fear the effect for some reason. They don't want it to go off, which I can understand. Losing 2 grade 1s is a pretty big deal. However, it happens all the time in Kagero. And for not this extreme of a cost. However, he is 11k, he is searchable, and we don't really want Lady Butterfly on the Vanguard circle. We want a more defensive Vanguard. So, I am running 1. Now, I'm only running 7 grade 3s. I usually draw into them, especially since the Giraffa is very searchable. And yeah, with draw triggers and such, you really don't need that many grade 3s. Whenever I run 8, I usually fail with it, so most of my decks have just 7. For grade 2s, we are running 4 copies of Bloody Hercules. He is the vanilla 10k attacker. He can usually hit most rearguards, or usually all rearguards, and most vanguards by himself. We are running stands, so you can see a lot of my attackers can hit by themselves, which is very important. We are running 4 copies of Tail Joe. He is my favorite grade 2. He is just ridiculously cool looking. He is just such a great attacker card. He gets a +3 whenever your opponent's field is not stood, or if it's all tapped rather, which makes him an 11k attacker by himself. So standing is very, very viable in this deck. We have Bewitching Lady, we have other extra copies of Mutant Master Beetle, we have Bloody Hercules, and now we have Tail Joe, all who can hit things by themselves. So I'll get to the trigger lineup later. I'm getting way ahead of myself. He is AK, which is kind of lackluster. Well, AK during your opponent's turn, which means he will suck up a lot of attacks. However, that's not so bad. Usually you get multiple attackers in your hand. 5k shields are very, very good in this deck. However, cards that act on your field as 10k shields do better, which means people will waste an entire column of 16 to kill Tail Joe, which means Tail Joe just acted as a 10k shield, which is very good, very good. Yeah, so he just makes my favorite card grade 2 eyes. Plus he looks so darn cool. And finally, for grade 2s, we are running 3 copies of the Ride Chain Giraffa. Now, out of all the Giraffas, he is obviously my favorite. He reminds me of that one TV show a long time ago. See if you can remember it. He is 9k stat, which means as an attacker, he is not so great, so usually you just use him to guard. On Vanguard, he gets that +1, making him a 10k, which is nice defensively. But he also gets the effect on Vanguard only, that when he hits, he makes something not stand. Now, this goes along, obviously, with the entire Megacolony theme of stunning your opponent's rear guards. However, what's so great about this is that it is free, which means no cost, no counterblast. You can guard early, you don't have to worry about having to have that one counterblast open and getting critted and then getting behind an advantage, which makes him such a great Vanguard. After that turn 2, though, that you get him, he's not so great. As a rear guard, he's just a 9k vanilla, so usually I just intercept with him or put him in front of something strong, or just try and suck up all the attacks that your opponent throws down. Plus 5k shield, once again, is good behind an 11k Vanguard. Just keep that in mind. Onto grade 1s, we are running 4 of the Ride Chain Giraffa. Just for consistency, seeing him in your opening hand is very, very important. Most of the time that I see him in my opening hand, I do very well in the fight. So, yeah, very good, very consistent, which is important in this game. We're running 4 copies of Paralyzed Madonna. Like I said, this deck is very defensive, so we don't need as many perfect guards. You won't find yourself using as many as you would think, as in most decks do. However, having the 4 is always important, especially since we have some decks who can really do a lot of damage, really, really fast too, and you never want to get caught in that situation. Plus, he's your outs to grade 3s, and like I said, I hate having too many grade 3s in a deck, so perfect guards are my best friend. We have 3 copies of Phantom Black. Now I know what you're thinking, only 3 copies, what's wrong with you? Most decks always run 4. However, think about it, so we only have really Lady Butterfly that we want it in front of. Maybe Tail Joe, maybe if your opponent has something that's not tapped and that's making him a static 8k. So Phantom Black would put him at a 16, which is decent, you know. However, he's not as good as the other grade 1s you will see in the rest of the video. By himself, he can hit stuff early game, so I guess there is that pressure. However, he just is not as vital as in most decks, such as Kagura. Onto the last few grade 1s, we are running a very, very rainbow-like grade 1 lineup. We have 2 copies of Megacolony Battler B. He is one of my favorite grade 1s. He is, you can see my favorite, I saved it best for last. He has that same effect where if it hits while it's boosting, you can counterblast 1 and stun an opponent's rearguard, which is awesome, especially since he has the same stats as things like Kimnara or Heat Nail from the Kagero clan. However, he does not have that pesky disappearing effect. He does not disappear, which means you get to abuse Battler B as many times as you want, or as many times as you have counterblast for, rather. Now, early game, you can put him behind your Vanguard, adding that additional pressure, making your opponent not want to let the Vanguard hit, which usually early game you can do. You don't want to minus too much by blocking a very, very strong Vanguard. So you can do that. You can also strip them of their own counterblast by making them guard, so they don't have that resource for them, so they can't use their effects. Also, late game, you can put another, or if you have that just one, put one behind a rear guard, which usually mid to late game, when they're at 4 damage, they want to block the Vanguard, take the rear guard attacks. So now they don't want to take the rear guard attacks, and they're forced to take the Vanguard attacks. Now you see in my trigger lineup that we are not running crits, but your opponent does not know that, so 4 damage is very, very scary for them. So that's why we're running 2 copies of Battler B, just additional pressure. And then finally for grade 1s, we're running 2 copies of Stealth Millipede. Definitely my favorite card of the deck. He puts in so much work. Your opponent, if he has no stood rearguards, so if they're all tapped, he gets the +4 behind the Vanguard. So he's a 10k booster, making your General or your Mutant Beetle a 21, which is amazing. This kind of a deck is so defensive, and having that kind of offensive power is just too much. Plus 6A isn't too bad, especially since all of your attackers are 9 and above, so you can hit for 15, 16, and 17, or 18 in front of, I guess, Butterfly. But yeah, just an amazing card. Definitely my favorite. On to triggers now. Start off with 4 copies of the Heal trigger. No reason not to run 4. Just an amazing card in general. Just amazing. Glad you can't run more than 4, obviously. We have 4 copies of the Draw trigger. Now, yes, with only 2 sets of support, we have to run rainbow triggers. However, I'm not running rainbow triggers. I'll get to that in a second. I keep getting ahead of myself. We have the 4 Draw triggers, which definitely help with the deck, consistency-wise. It's a 5k booster, which is good in front of most of your attackers, since you can hit for things like 11 by themselves. So 16 is also good, so that's an extra 5k shield your opponent needs to throw down. Plus, guarding for 5 is not too bad, especially since if you stun the unit behind the opponent's Vanguard, and if he's only hitting for 10 against your 11, you can drop a 5 for 2 triggers to pass, which is very, very impressive for a low-tier deck. And finally, we are running 4 copies of the Stand trigger. Wait, no, we're not running just 4. We're running 8 copies of the Stand triggers. That's right, 8 copies. Now, I'm not even going to bother organizing this. I know what you're thinking. Bad deck just got worse. 8 stands. What are you thinking? This is terrible. I don't even want to watch this. 13 minutes and 40 seconds into the video, and it's already it's hit its low point. This is terrible. I'm done. Bye, guys. No, really, crits are not as good as you think they are in this deck. In some decks, actually, in most decks, actually, you don't need the crits. However, that's a very, very narrow span for clans. Most clans definitely do need that kind of pressure. However, Megacolony is a very slow deck. Imagine it as a giant beetle, taking a lot of attacks, taking its time to get to where it wants to get, and when it's there, it forms quite well. It whittles down your opponent the entire time, making it very, very, very difficult for your opponent to retaliate. Especially if you stun their entire rearguards and you're getting up to 4, maybe even 5 attacks during your turn. Plus, when your opponent can only hit 4 or 10 with their Vanguard, it's quite unfair. Definitely quite unfair. Now, a friend recommended to run 8 stand triggers, and I listened to him just as a joke, and it performed extremely well. If you look at the all the grade 2 lineup and the grade 1 or the grade 3 lineup, all of your attackers can hit very, very nice numbers. They're all 11k or 10k, maybe even 12k. So a stand trigger here then really, really puts that kind of pressure on your opponents. Plus, the 4 crits I've learned do not do as much as you would hope. Vanilla triggers are not very good. You kind of want to focus either on stands or crits. That way you know which to attack with first, your Vanguard or your rear guards. However, now you know, let me attack with my rear guards, now the Vanguard. Also, it works very, very well synergetically with your mutant, Master Beetle. Usually you want to attack with him last. Why? Because his effect really, really targets your opponent's field. So if you want to target your opponent's front field, they usually will intercept if they're grade 2s. So if you attack with him last, they might forget, maybe, hey, I attacked with the Vanguard, I didn't get any triggers. I use his effect though, which means he can intercept for 5 and 5 to guard both of my rear guards if they're attacking unboosted. So usually you want to attack with Master Beetle last anyway, which makes stand triggers very, very viable. Yeah. Plus this one looks pretty cool, and blue's my favorite color, so why not? Generally, it's very difficult to play with stands. Hopefully in this channel we're going to do a kind of tutorial of how to play effectively with stands and what are the quote-unquote correct plays to do and what is definitely not a recommended play with stands. But we'll get to that in a later video. So that is Megacolony. I don't have the actual ratio built up. I can do it in my head really quick. Obviously 16 triggers, and the one starting Vanguard, we have 7 grade 3s. I believe it is for 8, 11 grade 2s, leaving 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 13 grade 1s. There you go. Math in your head is good. And if I did it wrong, please don't bother letting me know. Just don't. This is Will from the Vanguard Critic with my Megacolony deck. Thank you.